And there it is.
We
Fabiano
have
Caruana,
Wow.
7-0 in the Sinquefield Cup.
I can't believe what I'm witnessing. I really can't. This is unbelievable.
It's just fantastic. It's not about whether Fabiano wins today, it's how will he win today.
We're just a couple of days away from the beginning of the last couple of legs of the Grand Chess Tour, the St. Louis Rapid and Blitz, and of course the Sinquefield Cup. And I know you guys in the comments have always asked for a series about Fabiano's historical run at the 2014 Sinquefield Cup, 7-0. Just an absolutely incredible monster performance. Magnus called it depressing in the after tournament press conference. So definitely one that we had in mind for a very long time, and we're finally doing it. We're going to St. Louis right now. We're on our way. We're going to meet with Fabi, and we're going to go through those games, get his perspective, and just see what we can come up with. I'm very excited for it.
And here we are. We've been discussing about doing this for quite some time. I know you guys wanted to see this as the Sinquefield Cup is approaching. I think it's time to go and get a blast from the past. 2014 Sinquefield Cup, that was a historical event for many reasons, but one in particular. Fabi, obviously you started off with 7-0. That was absolutely incredible. Some people actually accused you of cheating. A lot of people were discussing that, were thinking that you were basically cheating at that point.
Yeah, in fact, some of my colleagues,
Top players,
maybe to this day, still think that I was. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if their opinion was modified later on, but definitely I know of some people.
Interesting.
But yeah, I can speak a little bit about the tournament. It was my first time back in the U.S. after a long period. I was invited a few months before by Tony Rich to St. Louis to play Sinquefield Cup. It was a second edition. First one was played in 2013, featuring Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, Levon Aronian, and Gata Kamsky. And Magnus won in a very convincing style, right? So this was a second edition. It was a double round robin, 6 players, 10 rounds. Magnus was playing. Levon Aronian was the second player in the world at the time. I was the third player in the world, very close to Levon. And then there was Veselin Topalov, former world champion, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, and Hikaru Nakamura. Those were the players that made up the tournament. And yeah, I came to St. Louis. I just remember it being like super hot, like 105 degrees. And it was at the time that people were raising money for ALS and for research to help.
You had to do
ALS.
that as well. You got called out.
Yeah, so they were doing this thing called the Ice Bucket Challenge. It was like some sort of viral campaign to raise money, and I participated in it. And yeah, that was one of my memories early on in St. Louis.
Did you switch federations before the tournament or after?
I was still playing for Italy.
You were still playing for Italy.
I was still playing for Italy. So the first time I hit this 2840 plus, I was playing for Italy. The second time I was playing for the US.
And you were living in Europe at that time.
I was living in Europe, yes.
Got it.
All right. I hadn't been back to the US in many years, and I didn't move back into the US until next year, 2015.
And I hope I'm not wrong, but I think that at that point, this was the strongest event ever in terms of rating.
Yeah, the average rating was like 2,800.
Yeah.
Because Magnus was 2,860 or something like that. Levon was 2,800 plus. I was 2,802. And Hikaru was close to 2,800. Maxime Veselin was, I think, around 2,800 as well. I don't remember exactly the ratings, but we were all in the high 2,700s to low 2,800 range. And then, of course, Magnus was 2,850 plus.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was a very strong tournament.
And I can tell you his rating was 2758, Maxime's.
Oh, Maxime, yeah.
2758.
Yeah, he was a little bit, he still hadn't broken through fully into the top players in the world.
Yeah. All right. Day one, round one, you're playing with the black pieces against Veselin Topalov, who at the time, I believe he was still an active competitor.
Yeah, he was still one of the best players in the world.
Slowly getting out, but yes, he was still active.
He was still very strong. It was only a few years later that he started to wind down his professional career. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was still around 2,800.
And he
So I was
started
playing
off
black,
with knight f3.
Knight f3, knight to f6.
c4.
c5. Okay, theory has changed a lot since those early days. I mean, this is still a decent line. Knight c6. I mean, okay, this is, of course, one of the main lines in chess, the symmetrical English 4 knights and g3, as Veselin played, and d5. And capture in the center, and this is like a huge position, bishop g2, and here black has many moves like g6, for example. He can even take on c3, I think, but I played knight c7. This is like the classical move because you want to stop white from playing d4, so you just get the knight out of the way.
Yeah.
This is some sort of like Marazzi position, but yeah, white is up a tempo compared to like normal Marazzi, right?
Yeah.
So e5. I think he played a3 first here.
He did.
Which there's like d3, a3. I forget the theory exactly. Like, okay, white's trying to play b4, very often sacking a pawn. And then after you take everything, then white sacks a piece here because there's queen a4 check. There's things like that. So, okay, I played rook b8, which is sort of preparing against b4 in some manner by kind of the rook kind of eyes. Like, if you imagine something like this, like trading everything on b4, then take queen a4, knight c6, the rook defends the bishop. Something like this.
That's very nice.
It's
yeah.
not really important. We don't care about the theory, but anyway, it's kind of the justification of this weird looking move.
And you were still in preparation.
Yeah. No, I had definitely prepared this line, and he had prepared it, I guess, too. I don't actually remember if we discussed after the game his preparation or something, but definitely I was prepared here.
He played d3, bishop e7, bishop e3, very standard natural moves up to this point.
Yeah, this is very normal. White is trying to develop the bishop to the only square it can kind of be active on, and then very often the knight goes to d2. And I think he didn't play it immediately, this knight to d2. He first played rook c1. I think this was like not very critical. And what did I play f6 here? Is this
bishop to d7?
First bishop d7.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, because usually the knight is moving from f3 to d2, and then it attacks this knight, so I prepared with bishop d7. Anyway, he played knight d2, so it makes sense of my move.
Now he played knight to d4.
Yeah, actually, there's like recent, not in this position, but very similar in the structure, Hikaru against Praggnanandhaa from the World Cup. Hikaru went for f4, and then we saw something like that.
He was worse in that game.
Yeah, he was worse in that game. But I think basically Veselin's move order was a bit inaccurate because normally you try to force black to play f6 by getting the knight to c4 quickly, forcing f6. And here's just like a little bit of a worse version.
He's a bit down in tempis.
Yeah, right? something like that. Like rook c1 was not the most accurate way. Okay, anyway, I play f6 and f4. I captured.
Very aggressive style, but Veselin, very true to himself.
Very typical. Because the problem is that if he doesn't, like, let's go back a move, if he doesn't, like, take advantage, then I get b5, I kick the knight away. And black is the one with the space advantage. So white needs to break up the center to create some sort of counterplay before black, like, this is usually either f4 or b4 are the ideas, but here b4 just loses the pawn, so f4 is the way.
Very nice.
So I took, now he took with the bishop, because if you take with the pawn, your king gets a bit weaker, and you don't have as many active pieces. So it's not like you keep more central pawns, but okay, you're going to get hit with b5 here at some point, and your bishop is a bit silly there. So bishop f4. And I played knight d6, kicking the bishop back. I think this is a bit unusual. Usually black doesn't get the opportunity to play this move, knight d6.
With a tempo.
Yeah,
on the bishop.
Forcing white to go back.
Bishop to d2.
And here, what did
b6.
B6. Okay, I think that probably black has like a variety of decent ways to play. Okay, b6, very circumspect.
And now, a crazy move. Very typical move for that tournament, as we will see later on. And in fact, in the next game, it did happen at some point. We will get to that in a second. But he played this aggressive move, g4.
What's his idea with this? It's to play actually bishop to e1, g3, because he really wants to get the bishop to an active diagonal. So it's a very unusual idea. I mean, it can also be connected with queen e1, g3, but I think his idea was really bishop e1, g3.
Yeah.
And kind of unusual. Definitely weakens the king. I was happy to see this, but I was like, okay, this normally can't be right, but it turns out it's not so bad.
Yeah.
To do this.
And now you played bishop to e8.
Yeah, bishop to e8. Also, my bishop on f7 is not bad. That's the thing.
It's a very interesting dance of the bishops.
Yeah, the bishops are kind of
trying to find their spots, right?
Moving around a little bit, that's true.
Bishop e1, and now you went for the attack.
Yeah, I went for b5, yeah?
Yes.
So I attack the knight. I'm just forcing white either to go back or potentially to a5. But the problem with a5 is I think there's like queen d4 check.
Knight a5, queen d4 check, yeah?
I think so. I think this was the whole reason. So it's a bit awkward for white. You can see that like this g4 has its downside, yeah?
And I'm sure at some point you probably will be able to capture that pawn on g4, and then he was probably thinking that he will get some compensation as well.
Yeah,
via
maybe
the g-file.
he definitely was taking some risks with this g4 move. So he went back to e3 for that reason, right? Because yeah, you have to stop this queen d4 idea, knight d2 as well, like there's queen d4. So here I played bishop d6, right?
Yes.
So this was the idea of b5. Was additional idea is that he wanted to put his bishop on g3, so I forced his knight back. I couldn't do this the previous move because with the knight on c4, there's this, right? So I first forced the knight back, and then the bishop can go here, can also threaten to go here. But in general, it's stopping his idea of bishop g3. So I think I was quite happy at this moment with this maneuver.
You were feeling secure in your assessment? You felt like you probably have a better position?
I wasn't sure, but I definitely... I mean, okay, I don't remember my emotions so clearly. It was a long time ago, but I think I was quite comfortable in my position. The only downside is that he does have the center. He has a central pawn majority. I have the C and F pawns.
And he immediately went for it with the
Yeah,
move
I think this was not a good move, if I remember correctly. Like, I don't know exactly why this is not a good move, but maybe he needed to do something else. Like, this allowed me to simplify. Because the thing is, he very often has these ideas of knight e4, which aren't... But once he plays knight d5, he kind of kills those ideas off.
Yes.
And I think this pawn becomes a bit more secure. So he went here and I traded, right?
Yes. Trade. He took away with bishop and then bishop to f7.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this bishop is very good there. Now the knight is no longer pinned, and I'm going to at some point move my knight. Maybe here, it could maybe potentially there, but knight d4 looks like a really nice square for the bishop. Then trade this, and if you trade off your light square bishop, your king is kind of airy. Yeah? So here I'm definitely very comfortable. Okay, knight to f5.
I'm looking at it from the white side, and it does feel like I'm getting something. It does feel like I'm getting close to your king. It does feel like I'm finding the right spots for my pieces. But in fact, at the same time, you felt quite comfortable with your position as well.
Yeah, because like, what are you... I mean, you're attacking this, so maybe if you get the bishop, then maybe bishop g3 comes with more force. But if I just move my bishop here, right?
Yes.
Then where is your play exactly? Like, your bishop's attacked. Okay, you have knight e7 tricks, but still you'll have to potentially deal with that. b2 is attacked. If I play knight d4, I will trade off all your active pieces at some moment. Like knight d4 trades off bishops and knights, and the structure around your king is still vulnerable. So you have to deal with that.
And just because you mentioned it, bishop takes h2, this is why it doesn't work, because you take on d5, and now this is the tricks that you were mentioning, knight to e7.
Yeah, this fork. So the bishop on d5 is immune for the moment, but just because a bishop is temporarily, or a piece is temporarily immune, doesn't mean that you never have to worry about it again. Like if eventually black plays king h8, then that bishop is actually hanging, right? But b2 is still a very serious issue for white at the moment.
Yeah. So you played bishop e5, queen to d2, as we were mentioning.
Yeah.
Bishop is taboo.
This also doesn't feel really right, this queen d2 move, and I think I punished it immediately with knight d4 as because okay, now this bishop is getting traded off, and then there's going to be knight b3 ideas because the queen on d2 is in the way. Yeah. So white has to trade on f7, right?
Yeah. Trade on f7 and rook to d1, get out of this knight to b3.
But you can see that already things went wrong because look, my pieces are centralized. White's bishop on e1, queen on d2, they don't make like a fantastic impression. Still, if you give white another move to play like bishop f2, the material could get simplified, and definitely black will never be worse, but it is possible that black won't be better.
Yeah.
So I took on f5, right?
Take on f5.
Now, you take with the pawn because if you take with the rook, queen d4 captures that pawn, right?
On g4.
On g4, the same tactic we saw. And here I think I played like really, really accurately.
Yes.
I don't remember how much time I had or how much time I thought here. I'm sure that...
you had 17 minutes at this point, and he had 26 minutes.
Okay, well, that's plenty of time for this position because definitely black is not risking. So I played queen d4 here. Now, the move itself is very logical because you attack b2 and you give a check to the king. But my target was actually not the b2 pawn. Okay. Because I still felt like the king was weaker. So queen d4 check.
Bishop f2.
Yeah, so now the b2 pawn, we trade queens and bishop c5. And black is not worse there, certainly. At least I don't think so. But we want to keep the queens on the board. We want to keep it from going for an endgame. So queen g4, king to h1. And I think that this was a very important move I made at this moment. c4. I don't remember exactly if black has like many ways to keep an advantage or not. But I think it's very important to play c4 because you have to undermine white's pawn structure. So rather than lose this pawn, I want to get rid of white's central pawns. That's why it's more important than taking this pawn, giving this one. And the thing is, like, if you ever try to threaten a mate, there is bishop to g1 and stuff like that. So it's not easy to actually get to white's king, which means that the e4 square is actually crucial. If white ever trades that pawn from d3, you actually get this very important queen to e4, and then king g1, and then you can maybe take on f5, and then you always have checks. So there's no like discovered attacks on the queen.
So like this, queen to e4 always.
Yeah,
comes in the
we can
position.
probably take on c4 first, because there's also this issue of the b2 pawn. It's a chronic weakness. So white is really struggling with a lot of weaknesses, and the a7 pawn is not attacked because
Perhaps a move that he missed from afar.
I think he probably already wasn't happy with his position, but maybe he didn't realize the severity of his problems here. He's actually borderline losing this position.
Wow. Yeah, it doesn't look like he's losing, right? It looks like, okay, maybe balanced, maybe sure black has some advantage, but at most minus 0.5 or minus 0.7,
maybe
something
it looks
like that.
So the point of his last move, see, he's potentially defending the f5 pawn if this ever moves, but also the e4 square that I mentioned. And of course, queen f5, there is still this like bishop takes a7 stuff, and then you can go back to h3, but then the bishop goes back to g1. So white is just trying to keep material equality here and trying to prepare maybe d4 and then e4, trying to control that e4 square.
Yeah. Rook to e8.
Yeah, so rook e8, because that e4 square is actually crucial. So if the pawn moves, then the bishop can move. But also, there's tactics with rook takes e2. So you can imagine even d4, maybe bishop takes h2 and rook e2. Actually, I'm not sure if that's kind of working, but
It looks good.
it might be very good for sure. But I'm not 100% sure because it is a piece.
Yeah.
But also, just imagine if you like go back. I mean, the e2 pawn, and then you don't really need to sacrifice in this position, right? Black's attack will play itself. Like we can imagine here, and then something comes into e4, right? Like,
Yes.
okay, now you realize that things are completely done for white, yeah?
I think the attack speaks for itself at this point.
Yes. Which, the attack always speaks for itself. That's all it can do.
Take on c4.
And now I think I took back, right?
No, queen h5 first.
Oh, did I play queen h5
Queen
first?
h5 first, yes.
Oh, wow, very subtle.
Queen h5 first. h4.
Oh, you know what the point is?
Yes.
I believe it. Bishop g1. Now this comes.
Ooh.
Now this comes. See, I don't even remember how I attacked. Or
And this
d8 or
check doesn't
f8.
matter.
Yeah, because you don't have any more checks because that bishop is pinned. There's no bishop d6. Queen is attacked. Bishop is attacked, so checkmate is threatened, and white will have to sacrifice the queen. But that's about
That's
where
it.
the good news ends for white. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're losing the game there. So that's why I provoked this move.
h4.
Yes, and now I go back.
Queen g4, indeed.
So now queen h3 is threatened, and then, so it would be possible to take on c4 first, but now I'm provoking h4, and now the king's open. Checkmate in 2 is threatened. He has to deal with this, and then I'll take on c4 next.
And he dealt with it.
Yeah, and
Queen
here I think I
d3.
took on b2, and he resigned.
He took on c4 first.
On c4 first, yeah.
Queen e3, rook e7,
Yeah, at this point, like, white's position is completely opened.
b3, and you actually did not
Oh, yeah,
take.
okay. Bishop
You played
b2.
Bishop b2, and he resigned.
And yeah, the thing is that now my pawn is actually promoting. Like, we can even go to endgames. I think queen f3, he probably saw something like this. C pawn goes forward, and c2 comes, and the pawn promotes. Besides the fact that I actually haven't sacrificed material here. I mean, 3 pawns here, 2 pawns here, equal material, but c2 is winning the
Game
house.
over. Yeah, I was looking through the broadcast, and they were talking about a hailstorm during day one. Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah, you just reminded me. Somewhere during the middle of the game, it like started raining very heavily, and then suddenly there was like the very recognizable noise of ice hitting the roof and hitting the
Yep.
windows and everything. And yeah, it was a very loud, very strong storm. But it lasted only a few minutes. But at some point, I forget which point during the game, we had this hailstorm. Yeah, it was an interesting summer. It was like 105 degrees, and suddenly it's hailing, and
One of those summer showers.
yeah, very, very interesting start to the tournament.
Excellent. Let's move on to game 2. That was a beautiful win against Veselin, who indeed was quite hot at that point. He was obviously playing a very solid, not necessarily solid, but very, very good brand of chess, for sure. Then in game 2, this is the one that we were discussing. You met MVL, who was 27.58, but he was on the rise. Very young MVL. I watched the broadcast. I told you he looked so young. Everybody was looking so young back then. It was pretty cool to
Well,
watch that.
2014, I was 22 at the time, just turned
Yeah.
22.
Yeah.
He's 2 years older than me. I forget which month he's born in, but he was around 24.
MVL is going to be in this year's Sinquefield Cup
Well, we've been playing against each other for
for a while.
first time we played was probably like 2009. I could be wrong about that. Maybe 2010.
Yeah.
No, I think 2009. So yeah, we've had a lot of experience against each other. The thing about Maxime is that everyone knows he plays the Night Orf, like exclusively, and he's done so his entire life with short breaks. And I expected that for this game. But after I played E4, he played C6. He played the Caruana. And I was surprised, but I actually had an idea in mind. I had prepared for someone else a few months ago with my coach at the time, Vladimir Chuchalov. He was there in St. Louis with me. And so even though this was a surprise, I still knew what to do here. So I went for the advanced variation.
Bishop F5.
Very classical knight to F3. I don't know if they call this like the short variation or what they call this, but
Yeah, this is the classical way to
yeah.
not G4, H4, the new
Yeah.
stuff. Now no C4, immediate attack in the center. Just
it used to be considered
Slow
too
development.
quiet. And then at some point, I think probably in the 80s and 90s, people realized that it's actually a very poisonous setup. And it was championed by, I think, some English players at the time, including Nigel Short. And yeah, so I played this, C5.
this was hot at that time.
This was quite, it still is. It's still a viable variation for black and quite theoretically important. Bishop to E3. Queen to B6, knight to C3,
Knight to C6.
to C6, castle.
This
Queen B2,
poison.
Queen E1.
Poison
Yeah,
pawn.
like we can go into theory of this. Of course, it's some crazy theory, but generally speaking, the point is that black is capturing a pawn. It's not a poison pawn, but obviously when you move your queen out while your king is in the center, it's very dangerous. And there are always knight b5 ideas, but very often black is actually ready to sacrifice that rook on a8. And the point is that strategically, very often black plays this c4, which kind of slows the game down, cuts the board in half. So even if you lose an exchange on a8, then you grab these two pawns and you say, okay, yeah, you can imagine something like this. Or very often the knight gets trapped, knight on a8 just gets trapped there.
It just stays there forever.
Yeah, it's just dead. It's still like it takes time to capture it, but it basically is dead in the water there. And black is saying, okay, yeah, I have no development, but the position is closed, so you can't really break down the structure, and therefore my queenside majority is very important. So that's kind of the idea behind black's play, and that's why instead of this knight b5 stuff, white is going for queen e1, which defends the knight on c3 and prepares rook b1, because if you capture that pawn on b7, then the rook is too powerful there.
Yeah.
So this is just general primer of theory in this line.
And he took on a d4. At this point, it still felt like he was within his preparation because he wasn't spending too much time. Bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4.
Yeah, so now that's why we took with the bishop, because now that bishop on f5 is attacked. So if you allow that to fall, then d5 falls. And additionally, there are knight to cb5 ideas. Now the theory is much more worked out now than back then.
Yeah.
Because back then, I think computers were not strong enough to figure this out. And so you kind of had to dig very deep. Now they just kind of show that it's objectively probably a draw.
Played bishop to b4.
Pinning the knight, so I defend the knight.
Knight to b5. And now bishop to a5.
Yeah. So
Which, by the way, it does seem like it's still considered the best move by the
I think that this is all correct. Everything that we did is correct. So I attacked the queen,
Yes. Queen takes c2, finally.
and then rook c1, attacking the queen again.
And
So
this was
basically,
the critical.
Queen b2, and this was kind of like this little shuffle just to open the c file. So it's all about the initiative. It's not about the material. Of course, black is up 2 pawns. And for some reason, for tactical reasons, knight d6 is not that threatening for black. So I played this move g4.
I remember this came as a shock. Maurice was screaming, "This is the money move right here."
No biases on Caruana's part. He said, no problem. Right now, G4 is the money move, and we've seen another G4 happen.
Yeah, so at the time computers didn't show this move. And it was just a result of like very deep digging into variation on my own and with my coach that we found this idea. And the point is that once black's bishop moves, then we start to basically try to trap this bishop, right? And the thing is, these days, computers just show this move as a possibility, which is probably evaluated as 0.00. And I don't even remember the theoretical lines here because, okay, it's been so long and I haven't checked this line basically since then. But I knew this was a draw. But I was less sure about it than I would be these days because those days computers were kind of fallible, and these days they just kind of show the truth.
At the same time, you looked at this line months prior to the game. Did you remember all the nuances of the position?
No. But I remember G4, and the rest, I mean, generally speaking, my memory for chess has been pretty decent. So even if it's been a while, I can remember the most important things, and the rest I kind of just fill in the gaps and figure out on my own.
And you played it very quickly. I watched the broadcast. I saw you immediately after he responded with Queen B2, G4 came instantaneously. You were putting pressure on him.
Yeah, well, I remember that this was the move, and I didn't want to hesitate because I can think on his time and try to figure out the details that I may have forgotten. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that, okay, like there is risk involved in this. Like white is down 2 pawns, white is moving pawns in front of the king, black has a bishop pair. There's a lot of tactics, right? Things are pinned, so on. So there is risk. But the risk is more with him, right? He actually doesn't know the position. I know, maybe I don't know all the variations, but I know the evaluation. I know that it's not bad for white. And that helps a lot.
F4.
Yeah, so F4, and so the threat is pretty clear, F5. And I believe from my old analysis that knight e7 was the main move here. But it's not easy, you know, because then you allow knight d6 and F5, and you have to sacrifice your bishop. And there's some crazy lines here. Yeah, king moves in F5, and you lose your bishop, and there's somehow black survives in this position. He played bishop e4, which is probably also fine. Basically, it's a very logical move, right? The bishop is no longer under threat of F5. It is also immune to capture from the knight because the queen is pinned. But I played this move, rook F2. I think I still knew this. And the idea is that very often I am going to move my bishop, potentially d3, maybe to f1, or somewhere else, targeting that queen. So the queen is not completely trapped. It can always go to b4, but it is semi-trapped, right? It's in danger.
Doesn't have a lot of squares left. Queen before, a3 is coming, all these ideas. And if you move away from this diagonal, then the queen becomes too passive.
Sure, yeah.
Especially even if you go knight to e7, then where is the queen going, right?
Yeah,
Doesn't have a
No,
spot to go back.
it's in a lot of danger. I think here is where he made the decisive mistake. But it's a logical move because he probably didn't want to put the knight on e7. Maybe, as you said, he thought that the queen needs to retreat that way someday. Or maybe he thought that he needs to get the knight in a position where it attacks some kingside pawns, right? Maybe. I don't know his exact calculations. But this move loses.
Knight h6.
And it's very concrete. So I played bishop d3, attacking the queen. Now he has 2 potential responses. He can move it, as he did, or he can play bishop b6. Unfortunately for him, this actually loses very easily because now I take on e4. So bishop f2, I can take back with the knight, getting 2 pieces. But also the queen still is potentially trapped. Like you see, rook c2 is actually threatening to trap the queen.
Knight e6, knight c7.
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's not just...
is
Yeah, that's what
trapping the
happens
queen.
here. This is what happens.
Yeah, that's very nice.
You take this.
Take with the king.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. The queen is trapped. Nothing else matters. You win the queen. And so after he played knight h6, I had to calculate this stuff, but it wasn't too difficult. And I played bishop d3. I basically had to calculate that like 3-move variation. And then after queen b4, it also wasn't too difficult. So I think I played rook to b1 here, attacking the queen. The queen moved.
To c5.
Yeah, I think it could also go to e7, but then there's knight d6 and rook b7 stuff. Like everything concretely just doesn't work out for black. So he went to c5. At least his knight g4 is a threat, but I take on e4. And so again, queen is attacked, but also queen is attacked here. So this turns out to just be lost. Now, on paper, it might not be that much of a material deficit.
Maybe you even get this pawn.
Yeah, but then the king attacks the knight. I forget if here or here, maybe here.
Yeah.
Because you can't take on h2, and then knight c7 comes.
Yeah.
So you lose more material.
Game over.
And if not, then what happens is that first we'll at some point consolidate this, killing the knight, and then the knights invade here, and black basically gets dominated. So this is actually dead lost.
Yeah.
Despite the fact it's about activity and peace quality, let's say.
Even on paper, but not so even
Yes.
in the objective assessment for sure.
So that's why Maxime took here. I took this bishop. The very important point is that taking on e4 allows knight d6 check and winning the queen. Or knight c7 check.
Or knight c7.
Whichever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that costs... So he has to stay down a piece. He castled.
Yes. Perhaps he saw this position and he was like, I have enough compensation. Knight takes g4 is coming. I have e3 ideas at one point. I do have 2 pawns after all.
It's possible he thought it wasn't so simple, but it turns out that first I deal with this threat, so the knight is actually a bad piece. Can't take on g4. a6 is met with, for example, queen c3. I think maybe also queen c7, but queen c3, let's keep it simple.
Yes.
So you don't lose a piece on b5. And the e-pawn is not really a strength. I mean, it can go forward, but then you just drop your rook back.
Which you did. He played
And
e3.
yeah, the pawn on e3 will probably be lost.
And then rook f2c.
Yeah, here I think I played queen e1, is that correct?
Yes.
So, okay, basically just gain out of the pin. Knight d6 is coming. That knight is really powerful, but also queen g3 will cover up the king side. And yeah, the game only lasted a few more moves here.
Yeah, it looks good already. Queen to d5. He played rook to b2, very calm.
Okay, stopping rook c2, protecting the pawn on a2, yeah.
Very nice. f6, he felt like he needs to do something
I
with
think
this
I
knight.
played queen g3 here.
Queen g3, take on e5.
I mean, f6 is already desperation. It's clear that black is just trying to get some activity for the knight. And probably I made one last move and he resigned here. Was it rook d1?
You exchange a pair of rooks. Rook takes f8.
And then queen e3, yeah?
Rook takes f8. You did not take immediately. Actually, you did take immediately.
I think so,
Rook
yeah.
takes e3.
Yeah, okay. Now he only has one pawn for the piece, and he has no counterplay against my king.
Knight f7.
And I think everything
knight
wins
to
here.
c3.
Yeah. If he trades on e5, take on b7 in the end, go to an endgame piece for one pawn, it's not enough. And yeah, I think that was it.
He resigned.
Yeah.
Very nice game. Very critical idea with this g4. I think we were discussing, everybody was discussing, they were saying, you and Chuchalov definitely worked very well together to find this critical idea of g4. It definitely created a lot of very early on separation in this game. It felt smooth after that. You knew where to look for tactical ideas in the position, what to calculate, not to be worried about any sort of like king opening. You were comfortable with the position, and that paid great dividends.
Yeah, this was a classic preparation win.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen often, but in this tournament, for some reason, I really got the openings I wanted. I don't know why. It's I think this is why. Like, there's this discussion about what's luck in chess. Definitely, if you get your preparation every game, that's luck, because you prepare a lot of openings, but that doesn't mean you get them on the board.
Yeah.
And definitely being able to get this on the board, but also the fact that he switched from his main opening for the Najdorf to the Caro-Kann and somehow inadvertently wound up in this preparation.
You might have given his Najdorf another 10 years of usage after this game.
Yeah, I think he did quit the Caro-Kann after this.
Yeah.
Because he was playing it in the World Cup in 2013. I remember that. We played a match in 2013 in the World Cup, and he was playing the Caro-Kann throughout that tournament. So his Najdorf was his main opening, but he was starting to experiment a bit. And after that, I think he just stopped.
It was like, Najdorf is good enough for me.
No, it could be bad emotions because there are some players who they have a bad experience in an opening and they just stop. I can give you one example. Topalov against Vichy was played in 2010, the match.
Yes.
World Championship match.
Yes.
Vichy eventually won, but the first game he played the Grunfeld against Topalov. Very first game. And Topalov played the bishop c4 variation and Vichy lost the game due to some sort of opening mishap. Something went wrong in prep and Veslin won straight out of the opening. And he did not repeat the Grunfeld for that match. He went on to, I think, Queen's Gambit declined, something else. And I think it was just because negative emotions. Okay, you can still play the opening, it's fine, but you just have that negative feeling.
It's interesting, right? A lot of players have negative emotions about the particular place they play in. If they don't do well in a particular city, they're like, I don't want to play there. I really don't like playing there. With openings, it's exactly the same thing. We're predisposed, I guess, to those type of ideas, right? It's a mental game after all. Round 3, this was a big one. You were playing the newly minted world champion, Magnus Carlsen. At that point, also the highest rated, 28-47. At that time, you're 28-23, so very, very closely related one to another. So how are your feelings about this matchup? Was this the first time you were playing him after he became the world champion?
No, it's okay. So he became world champion in 2013. I forget if it was December or November or something like that. Did we play in Vikensee in 2014? I have a feeling we did. I can't remember the game in 2014, Vikensee. Then we played in Norway chess for sure in 2014. I can't remember the game. What was the game in Norway chess? Okay, it's like already
So many years ago.
9 years ago. Yeah, we actually played for sure in the Gashima Memorial in 2014. I beat him in. Oh, we played twice in Gashima Memorial. It was 1-1. I beat him the first time around in Berlin with the white pieces. Then he beat me in the last round with the white pieces. Then we played in the Olympiad. He won that game. So it was very back and forth, very up and down. We were kind of trading blows at that time. He had a bit of an edge, but it wasn't much of an edge. It was like he was up a game or two. I had beaten him in 2012. He had beaten me in 2011. So we were definitely up and down quite a bit.
But definitely you could sense, and the spectators were sensing, chess fans were sensing this rivalry brewing between you two. And I think this is when that very important photo of Harry Benson, of you and him.
Yeah, that was
clasping hands
after the tournament. They did that photo shoot. Yeah,
that was really cool.
Yeah, there was this talk about like a rivalry or something. I wasn't in the World Championship cycle at the time, so I couldn't really challenge him. It was only 4 years later that I was able to challenge him. I got my chance right in 2018. But in 2014, he was playing another match against Vichy because I hadn't played the candidates in 2014. Vichy won the candidates again, or not again, but he qualified for the match.
Were you in the candidates?
No.
2014?
My first candidates was 2016. I played 2016, 18, 20, 21, 22, and 24.
Yeah, coming up in Toronto.
Yeah, next one.
Cool. All right. E4.
So I'm black. Yeah, e4, e5, bishop c4. I don't know why. I wasn't playing the Petrov at the time, I don't think. But he decided to avoid the Petrov for whatever reason. Anyway, I played c6. This is kind of like the problem with bishop c4, right? That it allows this expansion in the center.
d5.
And here this funny move bishop b4, because if bishop d6, very often white is trying to take knight c3 and so on. So using that c3 square for the knight. So first you have a check. And I think c3 is not considered too dangerous, bishop d2, but whatever. The point is that black loses a tempo, but you can't play knight c3. Kind of a funny idea.
Yes. Bishop to g5.
Yeah, this is definitely a harmless move, and here I took. So white is creating pressure in the center, but we just trade pawns, and the pressure has been neutralized. h6, kicking the bishop away, very typical. So you don't want to give the bishop pair up, so you go back. And queen to e7. The point is that I want to develop my knight to d7, but of course I don't want to lose my bishop. So first queen e7, preparing knight d7, knight c5 ideas.
Knight d2.
Yeah, and now knight to d7.
And I think this is also at the time when a lot of people were not necessarily speculating, but saying that Magnus, he doesn't have opening theory. Maybe he didn't have as well established opening theory at that point. Would you say that was the case?
He just had a different style. I mean, he always knew a lot about openings. He has a very good general knowledge of everything.
Yeah.
A very good memory as well. So his style is not to go for highly theoretical lines generally, but he sometimes does. And he definitely knows what's going on. This is a very stylistic approach. These days, it's actually the more common approach is to go for positions where you try to get a game. But here I don't think, chose very accurately. Because, of course, you get a position, but not a very dangerous one for black. It's actually rather easy to play. My knight's coming to c5. This bishop will drop back here, very harmonious. The problem for white is that the bishop on h4, it's pitting the knight, but it's more likely to get traded off or to get forced into passivity on g3. So it becomes a passive bishop.
Yep.
So, yeah, with Magnus, it really depends. I mean, these days, he maybe doesn't work so much on openings compared to in the past, but at some point he was working.
But I think he also has a much more established team, and he also went through a lot of world championship matches, which gave him a lot of
course, I mean,
knowledge.
No, the guy has worked more than
on
pretty
chess.
much anyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
People, of course, they don't really understand that just because someone's style is different doesn't mean they don't work on chess. It just means they work on it a bit differently.
And I think it was the case maybe before his world championship matches, perhaps as he was building up to 2800 plus. That's when he was experimenting with his openings and maybe didn't know precisely the opening theory and everything. But nowadays he's well established.
The thing is, like, everyone had a kind of rough openings at some point. Like if we go back 10 years, then okay, the only people who had good openings were like Vichy, Kramnik, Topalov. My openings were like literally nothing. I really had nothing. I had no repertoire. I would play I would repair a line before the game, like very half-assed, and yeah, you get a reputation because of games like the one we saw before this against Maxime, but this is like one in 100, right?
Yeah.
So this was more typical, this sort of game where you just get a position. Here, I think he made a rather dubious move. There's no reason to break the pin. It doesn't make any sense. Because you can wait for g5 or something, but why would you break the pin immediately? And the problem with this is that at some point that bishop is going to get attacked. So first I played bishop c7, just prophylaxis, getting out of the way of knight c4. So now maybe my idea is knight c5, or maybe it's knight h5. But before I deal with that, I just get the bishop out of the way. I wait for him to castle, and now knight to h5 comes.
Yes.
And now the bishop's attacked.
h3. This is a weird move by him. What's
so
his
this
plan?
is, if white had not castled, then after knight g3, white would want to take with the h-pawn to open the h-file. But having castled, white doesn't want to take with the h-pawn, because if we imagine this type of structure, the open h-file doesn't do anything for white. It actually does more for black, because black can try to exploit it with some kind of h5, knight f6,
Knight
creating
G4
threats.
ideas.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
So Magnus decided he wants to take with the f-pawn anyway, so he will force me, because now he's threatening bishop. Well, threatening is a strong word, but he's preparing bishop h2 to save the bishop. So he's kind of saying, okay, you will take, I will take back, and now I have forced you to capture, maybe when you wanted to delay it a bit more, and now I open the f-file. So the pawn on f7 is potentially a target, and if short castle, maybe there's knight h4. Doesn't look super threatening, but at least this is the idea.
We could say that we already exited the opening phase of the game, probably right now entering the middle game. How are you feeling at this point after this opening of the f-file?
I kind of understood I was better here. I remember this feeling that I'm already slightly better. Already I felt this after knight h5, that he didn't play it well and I'm already better. But I wasn't sure because castle, knight h4, okay, he's getting pretty active. But of course, I have the bishop pair. And objectively speaking, my structure is better. And I had some like good memories from, I think it was 2010 in Vikings. Very similar thing to this happened. He played an early bishop g5. Actually, Magnus was very often, early on in his career, he was attracted to his bishop g5 idea in the Spanish structures or Italian structures.
Pattern recognition.
Yeah, he really liked them. And he played that against me in a sort of d3 Spanish, I think. And I got an advantage from the opening, getting the bishop pair. And I was very close to winning that game, but eventually he defended, he made a draw. At the time, 2010, I was a very serious underdog against Magnus. I mean, I was not even 2,700 in 2010.
Yeah.
I was still like 2680 or so. But it kind of felt familiar. So here I made an ambitious choice. Rather than castling, I went for knight c5. Now, if white retreats the bishop, then it's a good outcome for me because now I castle, and now if knight h4, he no longer actually threatens knight g6 because with the bishop on b3, this pawn is pinned, knight g6 is a threat.
Yeah.
Here, no longer a threat. Knight h4 actually doesn't have much point to it, and I can play g6 if I want to stop knight f5 and so on. So Magnus also decided to be ambitious here, very principled. I provoked him in a way. Now, when he actually took, I kind of regretted it because I was like, okay, if he's actually taking on f7, maybe I missed something. But apparently my calculations held up. I mean, he took on f7.
Did you speak with him after this game?
No. I did
or?
not speak to him after the game. Definitely he was not happy after this game, of course. It was almost the end of his hopes of winning the tournament.
Right.
After 3 rounds, I'm 3 points, and he's 1 point.
1 point, yeah.
It's not like the end, but it's pretty tough.
It's significant.
2 point deficit is pretty tough.
You're running away with it, for sure.
So this point forces my hand. If queen f7, this is actually very bad because knight e5, the queen has to move, and once it moves, queen h5 check comes in, the king goes somewhere here, the knight f7 check comes in, and black loses the game.
Yeah.
So after he takes on f7, I have to take with the king because I have to get my king to g8. So he takes with double check, but I go to g8. Rather than e8, there's no queen h5 check. So now he has to make use of this knight, so he goes knight g6 because otherwise he is down a piece, and if you retreat, that's, black's
No
winning.
time for queen h5 to defend the knight because the knight is attacked twice.
Yeah. So I can just play bishop b5 there, or queen e5.
Yeah.
So knight g6, queen g5. So now he has to give an intermediate check because if knight takes h8, I can always take that knight at will. But I can also just like take something before that.
Yeah.
I can even make
Bishop e6.
most likely a preparatory move like this, and then that knight is dead in the water. So he gives this check, king to h7.
And this looks scary.
It's a bit
Not gonna
scary,
lie.
but if you imagine this position, white really has no attacking power left.
Maybe the knight can jump. The other knight.
Yeah,
coming to
you can
H4,
jump,
yeah.
but like, where are you jumping to is a question. And bishop h3 is a threat. So these things just don't work out for white, it turns out. Of course, it's a bit scary. It is indeed a bit scary, I have to admit.
How much did you spend on allowing this move, bishop takes f7? Because you must have calculated
I don't
this.
remember. I remember after bishop f7, I spent quite a bit of time. I was still a bit surprised that he took. And I started to wonder, what am I missing? So I calculated, like once he took on f7, I basically calculated up to this point. I saw rook h8 is not working for white, so knight h8. And I thought about this position a bit after he took on f7. And I saw that I had various decent paths here. The move I played is not the only one, but it's one which kind of convinced me that, okay, we're doing fine. So I played
Everything's
bishop
under
g4.
control.
Yeah. And after you see this move bishop g4, which is not the only good move, then you're no longer worried because the queen is attacked. So I break this pin. It's very important because my pieces are frozen here. But after this, I no longer have to deal with that. So if he takes here, like let's say queen takes or pawn takes, take, rook f8, then it's over.
It's over, yeah.
The problem is that he's not down material at the moment. He's actually up material significantly, 2 pawns, but you lose this knight, so that's it.
Yeah.
And definitely your pawn structure is nothing to really, like, okay, if you had this sort of pawn structure, sure, you know, but this sort of pawn structure, your pawns are kind of useless.
You're losing this one, you're losing... I mean, even your king is not completely out of
Yeah,
danger.
actually we'll see also in the game that, well, Magnus did get this structure. So he played queen to f1, which defends the rook. And yeah, the thing is here, I can take on f8. It's totally fine. In fact, it already feels like black is very close to winning. So I calculated a bunch of stuff which I can't remember, which I think mostly involved taking on f8 or playing queen e3 check or bishop g3, because white's king is very weak because I have the dark squares. Look at this bishop.
Oh, yeah.
But then, for whatever reason, this move kind of entered my imagination, and I was very attracted to it. And it was move knight d3. And the point is that if he takes, queen e3 check happens, and you basically just lose the game with checks. Because if he goes to h1, there's knight to f2, and then king g1, there's like knight e4, and then g3 falls, and everything, absolutely everything falls.
Yes.
And white doesn't even have counterplay, so there's nothing to worry about. Like, is there some check
This is
here or
just
something?
checkmate in 2 moves.
Yeah, that's it. So once you see the move knight d3, which is a bit shocking, and I remember his expression after I played knight d3 was actually one of serious surprise.
Oh, he didn't see it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the best move,
Huh.
objectively. I think it's like a very spectacular move. I couldn't resist playing it, but it's not the best move. Because, okay, what Magnus did is the correct way.
He took on d3.
Yeah, and so kind of the dust settles here. And as I mentioned, we get this structure. His knight is dead. I can take it any moment. I think actually, objectively, I should have taken it now, but I didn't.
No. He took on g4 first.
I think one important thing for white is that if there's like rook d8, then knight to f7, I think... Oh, wait, no, that's not the case.
Knight
What was-
f7, queen
Yeah,
c5.
what was the problem with rook d8 here? I think it was knight to f3.
Knight f3 and
Knight
knight
f3,
d4.
yeah. Then queen c5, knight d4, and if rook d3, knight g5, and this knight will escape. on
Find its
f7.
way out, yeah?
Yeah, it somehow finds its
Does
way
it?
out. Well, I mean, there's also knight
at
h8
least you
check.
have,
yeah, you also have rook
perpetual.
f1, but you also have knight h8 check.
That's nice.
So, okay, the knight kind of finds its way out, and of course, black can pick up a bunch of pawns, but white is still up of a few pawns, so white has some, let's say, some luggage that it can kind of, or
dispose of.
like when a plane dumps fuel, yeah? It's like just we'll dump some fuel.
material.
Yeah.
Why
so,
not?
So that's why I did not, the pawns were doubled here. Queen is on d3, knight on d2. That's why I did not play rook d8, but I should have probably played king h8. I think objectively that was the best. Instead, I took on g4. I don't know why. I decided I'll leave that knight on h8. Well, of course, it's not going anywhere.
You're also getting close to the king, right?
Yeah. So queen g4, and now I'm only down 1 pawn. Of course, the knight cannot be saved, so
We're not counting that knight.
we're not counting that knight. So white is up 1 pawn, but it's one of these pawns, and they're probably going to get captured. At least one of them will.
Yeah. And you also still have ideas of... Isn't that the checkmate?
Yeah, right
threat?
now I'm threatening pretty much checkmate 2. Bishop b6. If the king moves, queen h5, and queen d4 will lose the queen. So I was effectively a checkmate in 2 threat.
So he played the move knight to f3.
Yeah. Here I think I again decided not to take the knight on h8. Basically, the point of knight f3 is that you can cover. Can you go to f1? No, I don't think you can go to f1.
Probably not. Maybe
yeah.
queen h5 ideas.
I don't know.
Once again, go.
I'm not sure about this. Also, you can kind of potentially go to h2 and then cover the h file with the knight.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, bishop b6 check is not working out, so I took another pawn, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now we see that white's king is pretty barren. And there are ideas of bishop b6. And that knight is falling at some point. So Magnus decided to get counterplay quickly. Okay, he forces my hand. As we said, the knight...
Finally,
Yeah,
take my
now,
knight.
No, now I have to, right? And
Really,
now I have
take my
nothing
knight.
better.
E6. He was
Yeah.
going for it.
So he's getting very quick counterplay here. But the problem is the king. So if I give a check here,
He doesn't have knight to d4.
he doesn't have knight to d4. He doesn't have king f1. Queen f2, checkmate.
That's
so it goes to h1, yeah?
Yes.
And now queen to g4. Now there's ideas of queen to h5, but also queen takes e6, right? So
Queen on g4 reminds me of the game against Veselin.
oh yeah, that's true.
Very
No,
similar.
it's actually similar in some ways. Yeah, I didn't make that connection. But white's king is weak. It's on h1, and we have a different material balance. But that king is the target. Like very often, queen h5 is leading to either checkmate threat or displacing the knight in a decisive way. But also, if I just take this pawn, I'm winning.
Yeah.
Because I've already gotten a material advantage, but also long-term, white's king is weak. So white cannot afford to lose that pawn. That is the most important pawn in the position.
Yeah. And that's why he played the move queen to d6.
Yeah, now I don't remember all the specifics of this position, but I remember there were things like if you defend the rook with rook to e1, I think there's like rook takes f3.
And then queen to h4.
And queen to h4, yeah, I
rook
think
on
there were
e1.
things like this. So a lot of tactics. So queen d6, his point is actually that now he's dealing with this with potential queen to h2, right? So the queen is also providing a defensive function on h2, defending this pawn, and also attacking the rook, so forcing my hand a bit. So I played rook to d8,
Yes.
attacking the queen.
Queen to e5.
Yeah, again, if it goes to like h2, I just take this pawn.
Yeah.
Simple.
Simple chess.
You don't need to mate white. You just need to win material now.
Yeah.
Now I think played a very important move. Rook to d5, if I remember correctly.
Yes. Rook to d5.
Basically, again, white's queen, if it goes to h2, I take, well, actually, in that case, I was over rook h5, but white cannot lose contact with this pawn. And if white goes to e2, then there's rook to h5, and after knight to h2, I can both take the queen or rook h2, checkmate, whatever.
Checkmate. Yeah. Yeah.
So white has to play this move. No
Yes.
choice. King h7. Now the pawn on e6 is hanging.
So he needs to go for it.
Yeah, he
Yes,
needs to go
push.
for it. Now, if rook to e1, I think it does defend the pawn, but I think there is a...
Maybe
this was an important line, but there was a rather simple refutation, which I'll try to remember now. Okay, so rook to h5, knight to h2. There is bishop f2 on the cards.
That's right. That's the move. Yeah.
Is it immediately bishop f2 or
Yep.
first this?
Yep.
e7,
And I think bishop g3 perhaps just
bishop g3, e8, rook h2, king g1,
bishop f.
and just
no, bishop f.
just bishop b8. I think that's simple enough. We can show this line.
Yes.
Queen. We don't have a... Where's the other queen? It's over there.
We do have another queen. Yes.
Okay, well, I got two queens. And now, maybe there's checkmate, but in any case, this is simple enough, right?
Yeah.
So
We get checkmated.
just a sample of some possible lines. That's why Magnus went for it. In this position, he didn't play rook to e1, he went e7.
Yes.
And I think this was the important move that I foresaw, which is queen to h5. It looks like rook h5 is the move, right? It looks like you include the rook in the attack. But the important thing is that the rook stays on d5. Now, he should have played queen h2, but now simply queen to e8, and you lose that pawn on e7.
Because of rook to h5 threat as
Rook
well.
to h5, and if rook to e1, now that typical idea, the rook cannot move because rook to d1. So, for example, rook e4, rook d1, right?
Oh, this is
And-
really nice because if you start with rook h5, knight h4, now he has rook to e4.
Yeah, I think this is probably also still very good for black.
But there's no more rook to d1.
Yeah, but not as simple. So we play bishop f2 first. And if rook to f1, now rook h5. And in general, this pawn on e7 is also falling. So in this position, after queen e8, I win the pawn on e7. I finally get rid of that pawn. It is by force. White can play a move like g4 here, for example.
Yeah.
But I simply take the pawn on e7 and I have a winning position.
Yeah.
But it's not resigns. It's winning, but white can still make some moves.
Try to fight alongside the light squares.
I think basically Magnus spent his time. He saw queen h2, queen e8 is basically like game over. And then he was like, okay, what to do? Knight h2, and didn't calculate. And this is why we played queen h5 and not rook h5. I played rook d1. That's the point. It's not about the checkmate on the king.
Right.
It's about the fact that after the trade of rooks, yeah, white has to interpose with the knight. I take the knight here, and I think that everything wins in this position. It's pretty much checkmate. He does have this pawn, but just queen g1, followed by queen to e3. And yeah, I forget at which moment he resigned exactly, but yeah, I pick up the e7 pawn
He
with check.
resigned after queen g1.
Yeah, he didn't have to see if it was checkmate or not. It's just that queen e3 check picks up the e7 pawn, and that's game over.
Yeah, no, absolutely fulminant start to your campaign in your first Sinquefield Cup. As you were mentioning, beautiful start. And obviously you must have felt quite good after this victory against Magnus, especially with the black pieces, starting with 2 black pieces in the first 3 games. That must have given you a boost of confidence. But at the same time, 7-0, that's, a completely different story. How did you feel at this moment in time in the tournament, and what were your expectations for the remainder of the tournament?
Yeah, the thing is, of course, 3-0 is a dream. But if we, like Norway Chess 2014, I started with 2-0. I beat Grishuk in the first round with black, then I beat Fiedler in the second round with white. And I didn't win the tournament. Karakin won the tournament because I finished rather poorly. And he somehow came from behind and he finished with like +3. So a really good start like that doesn't guarantee anything. Now, it is a very big step towards winning the tournament, but yeah, 3-0, I wouldn't say that like you're guaranteed victory. Of course, beating Magnus with black, beating Veselin with black, that second game against Maxime as well, despite the fact that it was prep, still a very, very nice victory. Yeah, you can't say much. It was definitely a very, very happy moment.
Absolutely. And do you remember who was behind you, closest in standings?
I think there was someone on 50%, but that's about it. Like I forget who it was. Maybe it was Levon.
Yeah.
Magnus was -1 after this. He drew his first 2 games with the black pieces. I remember he drew a very fascinating game with Maxime in the first round from a Scotch. Then he drew with Hikaru in something. Forget
Berlin.
It was a Berlin.
Berlin,
yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, he was -1. Nobody was on plus score. And I think at the end of the tournament, nobody was on plus score except for Magnus.
Yeah.
Magnus was like +1.
Well, you were stealing a lot of points from a lot of
Yeah,
people.
yeah, no, nobody.
So-
No, I was definitely helped by the fact that nobody else seemed to be fully at their best.
Well, great start. And this was our part 1 of this series that we're going to air before the start of the 2023 Sinquefield Cup. We'll be back, and we'll be back with part 2. We're going to cover the last 4 games of this historical streak. So yeah, we'll see you guys in the next video.